Alrighty guys, happy Monday. Today is September 30th and I've been waiting to make this video for literally the past few months, ever since back in June of this year. And today's a very special day because I am going to be getting my very first cinema camera today in the mail, which literally I'm just like outside of my house waiting for FedEx to come. But today we're going to be getting our hands on the brand new Canon C400, which I have been waiting for months to get my hands on this camera. Technically, it was supposed to come out in early September, but literally it did not ship until pretty much the end of September. So it's pretty much a month late in terms of its delivery date, but still we're able to get this camera much sooner than I expected. So I'm very excited to get my hands on it. So today is a huge day for me because as a cinematographer, as a filmmaker, it is a filmmaker's dream to own their own cinema camera. And it's one thing when you're working with mirrorless cameras, like literally right now I'm recording on the Sony FX3. So it's one thing to own a mirrorless camera, but it's another thing when you actually get to own a cinema camera. So taking that transition and taking that jump to actually move into a cinema camera is like a huge advantage, and it's just like a dream come true, and it's just something that I've been waiting for a very long time. Now for those that know me on my channel, you guys know that I've been a huge Canon shooter. Like literally I've had the Canon R5, had the R5C, and the R5C has been my main A camera for literally the past few years. However, I did sell off my Canon R5C earlier this year because I was getting my hands on like Canon C400. So pretty much for the past few months my main A camera has been the Sony FX3, which is what we're recording on right now. But today a lot of things are going to change because our new A camera is going to be the Canon C400, which I'm just so stoked to get my hands on. Like literally having a professional cinema camera is going to change a lot of things, especially not only just for this channel, but just a bunch of films that I shoot, especially when it comes to short films, indie films, even documentaries. Obviously, I'm still working on my documentary with Krivy, which is going really well. Now, personally, for the Canon C400, one of the big things that I'm looking forward to is the built-in ND filters. Like that is easily going to be one of the biggest transitions going from a mirrorless camera to a cinema camera, is that I'm not going to have to play around with these filters to get perfect exposure. Like I can get perfect exposure with built-in NDs, which is going to be very nice. So definitely a lot of things to unpack with the C400. But today on September 30th, it's also another big day for my dad because today is his last day working for Intel. He has been with Intel for, I would say, close to 30 years at this point, which is just an incredible achievement. And honestly, I'm very proud of my dad. You know, he has been working with Intel for a very long time, even before I was born. So just being able to see the work that he's been able to do, and now that he's finally coming into his next step of retirement, is a huge thing. So I'm very excited to see his next steps of what he's going to be doing. Today is a very big day, September 30th, 2024, and gotta mark it down in the books. It's a big one for the both of us. Alrighty guys, so we are here in the studio, and as you guys can tell by my excitement, I'm very excited to get my hands on the Canon C400. I literally still remember the day on June 5th when I placed my pre-order for the Canon C400, and finally after a few months we finally have the package here in the house. And as you guys can tell, this is a much bigger box than what we usually get here in the studio. And I will say first impressions getting the package is that it's a lot lighter than what I was typically expecting it to be, mainly just because as a cinema camera it's a lot heavier compared to something like a mirrorless camera, which is what we're filming on right now. So definitely the difference is substantial, but I will say the C400 feels a lot lighter than what I was expecting it to be. So that is definitely a good thumbs up on a camera that I'm first getting my hands on, because obviously if I'm going to be using this thing day in and day out, I want it to be somewhat lightweight, so that way it's something that it's manageable to kind of go around my day and actually film. So that's something that I'm very excited about. But anyways, I feel like we'll get into specs later, but for right now, let's get into the unboxing. So as you guys can see by the receipt, $7,999, literally an $8,000 camera. Thankfully with B&H we are saving on tax, so we're saving about $600. So thank you B&H, obviously they're always a plug when it comes to buying camera gear. Alrighty guys, and here we have it, the Canon C400 finally at our fingertips. Literally, I've been waiting for this thing for months to come in, and I will say it is kind of funny because first up, looking at the box, it does say 4K and 2K, even though that this camera can record 6K, so it is kind of weird that they don't put 6K on the box, but it is a 6K, 60 frames per second capable camera, which is honestly insane, and it is the latest in Canon's line of cinema cameras. So man, does this feel like a treat that we are getting today. now it's time to get into the camera. Honestly, I'm kind of nervous taking the C400 out of the box because this is literally my first cinema camera, and I'm just kind of thinking about all the hard work and dedication that has come to this point for me to be able to afford a cinema camera. It's just something that I'm still processing in my mind, but definitely this thing is going to be a beast in my production. So let's take out the Canon C400. I will say I'm just immediately, first impressions, just impressed by the size of this thing. I was definitely expecting it to be quite a bit bigger, but I will say in terms of just the build quality and just how light it is, it's just something that I'm very astounded by, and just what you're going to be getting to have within this camera is just something that is absolutely crazy. This thing is a 6K beast. It can do 6K up to 60 frames per second in RAW, 12-bit RAW, which is just absolutely insane. And yeah, this thing is going to take me to quite a few places, which I'm very excited to get my hands on. So now that we have the camera in box, let's get this thing set up with the proper setup. So let's get into it. So guys, it's pretty late right now. It is pretty much 9 o'clock at night. So I think tomorrow in the morning, we're gonna first take this thing outside, get this thing fully set up so that way it's ready to go, and yeah, get some really cool shots, because we got the Sennheiser MKH460 attached, we have the RF 24-70, and of course everything else comes with the C400. So ultimately, first thoughts, loving this setup. This thing feels really nice in the hand. It's really lightweight, portable. Can easily fit this into a backpack, and yeah, just run and gun, do some filmmaking with this thing. So definitely tomorrow in the morning, let's take out the C400 and get some shots. Alrighty guys, so right now we're at the beautiful Lake Matoma. We're shooting the lake right here, which looks incredible, especially with the Canon C400, and I thought that'd be the perfect place to test the C400 and testing it in different modes. Right now we're testing in modes such as 4K, 4K 120, 6K, and also 6K 60 frames per second. So definitely there's a lot of options to choose with the C400, and we just came out here to get some footage just to see how it looks and also give you guys a bit of some perspective of how a cinema camera looks. So this thing, I gotta say, like, there's just something about the image that just makes it look so much more cinematic compared to like a regular mirrorless camera. Now obviously cameras like the Sony FX3, the Canon R5C, you can obviously get them closer to that cinematic image, but there's something when you're just shooting from a true cinema camera like the C400 that it just has like this little extra bit of juice that just like makes it look more cinematic. I don't know exactly what it is that makes it more cinematic, but there is something within most cinema cameras that is just like, it makes it different compared to mirrorless cameras. So definitely so far I'm enjoying it. Now for me personally, I've felt pretty comfortable with the Canon Cinema operating system just because I've owned the Canon EOS R5C. So there's a lot of things that are similar between the R5C and the C400 in terms of the operating system. But I will say that there are a lot more options built into the C400, that it has a bunch of programmable buttons that you can actually map it to. So I've already changed up quite a few of the buttons on the side to change it to something that I'm more comfortable shooting with. Of course, it all just depends on the user of how you're going to be using your C400, but personally I love the idea of having the programmable buttons there. I think it just makes it so much easier. There is quite a bit of a jump going from mirrorless to cinema, but definitely I've been able to get used to it, and I feel like for most people, if you have worked with cameras like the Canon R5C or the Sony FX3 and you're getting your hands on the C400 as your first cinema camera, just like myself, I feel like the transition isn't too big of a leap to understand what it does. So obviously if you're someone who's coming from like a smartphone or you don't necessarily own a lot of mirrorless or DSLRs, then obviously I'm not going to recommend you to go out and get your hands on the C400. But if you are someone who is looking for a true first cinema camera and you've worked with mirrorless cameras, you've worked with portable cinema cameras, then I would say go for the C400 because it's really going to help you out in your productions. And the types of footage that I've been able to get out of this camera is absolutely insane. The 16 stop-side dynamic range looks really, really good coming out of the C400. So definitely I've been thoroughly enjoying my time with the C400, and just let me know what you guys think about the footage down in the comments below. Alright guys, and here we have the Canon C400 in all of its glory, and we came to Folsom Lake to test it out, and right now the sun is about to set, so I thought let's get a couple shots of the sun setting. So when it comes to the Canon C400, it does have dual pixel autofocus version 2, which is just really, really nice. Now, one neat thing about the Canon C400 is that this is one of the world's first cameras with triple base ISO. Now, for those who don't know what that means, a lot of cinema cameras and some mirrorless cameras have things called dual base ISO. For example, the Sony FX3, which I'm recording on right now, has a dual base ISO of 800 and 12,800, which means that if you set your ISO to either 800 or 12,800, your ISO and your overall exposure is going to look really clean. There's not going to be a lot of noise in the image, which is a really nice thing. So the fact that the Canon C400 is the world's first triple base ISO camera at 800, 3200, and 12,800 is really nice. So that means that if you're on 800, 3200, or 12,800, that means you're going to get very minimal noise and your image is going to look really clean with exposure. Alrighty, so one question that I got asked about the new Canon C400 is that, is it good enough for vlogging? And honestly, the image looks incredible for vlogging. However, because of its size and weight, definitely not a go-to for vlogging. So if you're planning to use this for YouTube, yeah, you can definitely use it for in-studio stuff, but if you're planning to use it as a vlog camera, this is not the move. I mean, honestly, like, it'll get pretty tiring pretty quick. The C400 is the first cinema camera that I've ever owned in my life. I've literally only owned mirrorless cameras and DSLRs in the past, so this is definitely a huge jump for me in terms of my work profession and the types of videos that I'm going to be shooting. So there's definitely a lot that I'm taking in and just kind of getting myself adjusted to. I will say the size is something that I'm still getting adjusted to, since it's much bigger than any other camera that I've ever owned. But the nice thing about the C400 is that it is much more compact compared to the Canon C300 Mark III or the C500 Mark II. So it's definitely a lot more lightweight, but you're still getting the same level of video capabilities from the C500 Mark II into the C400, which is just really, really nice. So far, when it comes to dynamic range, I'm honestly pretty satisfied with it. I know that if it did have a dual gain output sensor, I would be able to get 16 plus stops of dynamic range compared to just the 16 stops that Canon is advertised with the backside illuminated stack sensor. But honestly, for the most part, you're not really losing a whole lot of dynamic range just by not having the dual gain output sensor. So far, 16 stops seems to be really doable. And when it comes to Canon cinema cameras, they're pretty accurate when it comes to dynamic range based off their cinema cameras, since I know the Canon R5 Mark II also claimed that it had 16 stops of dynamic range, but I think in reality it was like 14, maybe 15 stops max. So I know with the C400 it definitely hits at 16 stops compared to the R5 Mark II, so it's definitely nice that we are getting a little bit of some boost in the C400. And overall, just having built-in NDs has been really nice. I don't have to worry about screwing on or screwing off filters, or if I have a VND, like a variable neutral density, I don't have to worry about always adjusting it at that time, because I can literally just flick on an ND, flick it off just within the camera itself, which I have genuinely enjoyed. And having features like mini XLR and SDI out has been really beneficial, especially for transitioning my work into a much more professional level production. There are a lot of times where I see myself needing to use SDI out, or even using mini XLR, which we do have connected, the Sennheiser MKH416, and I gotta be honest, I do think the audio is going to sound a lot more crisp because of this new setup. So definitely, as my new A camera and my new studio camera, the C400 is going to make a huge difference here in the studio, and of course just with my work all around. So I'm very excited to use the C400 more often. In terms of the positives, the battery life with the BPA-60N batteries seem to be really good. It can last close to 200 minutes, which is really nice. So definitely, if you're worried about battery life, I honestly don't think you need to worry about it too much. And it does have a DC in port, so that way if you want to connect things like a V-mount battery or a gold mount battery, if you just want to connect DC into a wall, you can do that as well. So when it comes to battery, there's a lot of different options of how to power on this camera. Another feature that I love about the Canon C400 is the variation of codecs built into this camera. You have things like RAW HQ, RAW Standard, RAW Lite, XFAVC, XFHEVC. So there's definitely a lot to choose from with the C400. Personally, for me, I shoot usually with either XFAVC or I just go into the RAW modes to shoot in 6K. So there's definitely a lot of features that are within the camera that I can utilize for most of the time. In terms of the resolution, the 6K does look very crisp, and it does handle highlights and shadows really, really well. So honestly, I'm just a huge fan of the C400 already. Like, again, there's not a whole lot of negatives that are there with the camera, and it's just overall been a very great camera to use. And I'm honestly genuinely excited to use this camera for some productions that I have upcoming later this year and also next year. I know next year is going to be jam-packed with a bunch of projects that I'm working on, so definitely stay tuned onto the channel to see see some of those projects come to fruition. But for the most part, again, just loving the C400. In terms of where improvements could be made to the C400, so far the only thing that was a negative to me was the fact that we're only getting a single CF Express Type B card. I really wish that we could get dual CF Express Type B, since that's going to be the main card you're going to be working with. So honestly, it would have just made more sense if they had dual CF Express Type B rather than CF Express Type B and one SD card. So that's kind of one thing that I would consider for Canon to make that change. But other than that, there's really not a whole lot that's wrong with the C400. Now, for cameras that are a direct comparison to the Canon C400, I really wouldn't compare this directly to a Sony FX6, nor would I compare it directly to a Sony Burano, but I genuinely feel like if you were to blend the Burano and the FX6 into one camera, that's pretty much the Canon C400. So if you're someone who's looking at this camera and you're being like, oh, like it's obviously a lot better than the Sony FX6, but it's not as good as the Sony Burano, then I wouldn't say to strictly compare, one camera to the C400, and I would kind of take the best of the Sony FX6 and take the best of the Sony Burano, put it into one body, and that's what I would call the C400. So personally for me, I don't know any cameras that you can directly compare the Canon C400. I know a lot of people are probably going to be looking at the Red Komodo and the Komodo X and looking at the C400, being that it's a full frame option within the RF line of cinema cameras. So that is one thing that I'm pretty sure a lot of people are thinking about. The only other thing that I can think about is maybe comparing it to something like a Canon Infinity Mavo Edge. I know that camera is also full frame 6K, so that could be one camera that you're comparing the C400 to, but other than that, like the C400 feels like it's in a very special place given both its price tag and the features that it offers. So personally for me, I feel like the C400 is really good, especially for cinematographers that really want their first cinema camera and they're obviously upgrading their work into indie films, production level films, documentaries, weddings, like high-end weddings of course, and really seeing themselves needing the upgrade to the C400. So definitely if you're in that bracket, that's where I recommend the C400. But otherwise, if you want to get the professional capabilities of the C400, but maybe you're not at that level just yet, or if you want a lighter body, then I'd say just wait for the Canon C80. I think that's going to be a very popular camera to come out later this year, and I think a lot of people are going to be switching to the Canon C80. So personally for me, the C80 is going to be like my main run and gun cinema camera, where my backup camera is going to be the Sony FX3, and of course more for a studio camera, and of course also for documentaries and my films. That's where I'm going to be using the C400. So definitely, I personally love to own different cameras. I don't like to have two of the same cameras because I know there's probably going to be a lot of people picking up two C80s, but personally for me, honestly, I like to have one of each different type of camera out there. So obviously having a Canon C400 is going to be nice, having a Canon C80 to match it with the C400 is also going to be nice, but even just having the C80 as a secondary A camera is going to be really nice because I can pair it with my Sony FX3. And that way I can get a really good A and B camera, especially when I'm running gun, and if I just want to have a lighter load and I don't want to necessarily carry the C400, because that is going to be a downside with the C400, is that I'm not going to be as running gun with the camera compared to something like a Sony FX3, which can easily just fit into a backpack or into a sling. So that's one thing to kind of think about with the C400, is that it's not going to be my running gun camera, but it's definitely going to be more of my professional camera to use on my professional events. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to talk about the C400, but I feel like I covered up most of the points. If there's anything that you guys want to know more about the C400, or if you guys want me to make a follow-up video, definitely let me know down in the comments below. I'm more than happy to respond to you guys there. I know there's a lot of tests that I could do, like testing out the dynamic range, testing out the triple base ISO. I know there's a lot that I can do with that, but there's already been so many other videos on YouTube, like literally testing out all the base ISOs and testing out the dynamic range. So if you want to see those videos, I'll make sure to link them down in the description. So highly recommend to go check out CVP's video on the C400. I know they did some really good tests with the Canon C400. So if you want that technical aspect, go check them out. But that's going to do for us on this video with the Canon C400. Again, if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns regarding the C400, let me know in the comments down below. And that is going to do for us on this video. So make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next video. Take it easy. Peace.